Welcome back to the channel, everybody, and we're here. It's the 2025 Deep Dive Series for the NFL season 2025. Did I say 2025 enough yet? Also kind of 2026, because the last 2 weeks of the season, I think, are in 2026, and the playoffs are all played in 2026. But that's okay, because we're going to rank every single team from 32 down to 1, and this is the number 32 team, the Tennessee Titans, coming off the number 1 pick. Now, this is not a reflection of what I think their record is going to be at the end of the year. This is just a power rankings based upon a formula concocted to rank all their players and all their coaches and how the passing and the run game and the defense and the coverage and the run stuffing and all that works together. And I'm actually going to put it up on the screen right now, the formula that I use, so you guys know exactly how I came up with these rankings. The overall ranking is 60% offense plus 30% defense plus 10% of the head coach. Now, when you break down the offense, it's 60% passing game, 30% rushing, and 10% the offensive coordinator. The passing offense grade is made up 45% quarterback score, 30% the weapons that they have at their disposal, and 25% the offensive line's pass blocking ability. We also have the running attack, which is 60% running back, 40% offensive line's run block ability. And then there is a quarterback bonus, if applicable, for the Lamar Jacksons and the Josh Allens and all that. Then the defense, it's 60% pass defense, 30% rush defense, 10% defensive coordinator grade. The pass defense is made up of 45% pass rush, 40% DB coverage, and 15% linebacker coverage. Then the run defense is 45% defensive line, 45% linebacker, and then 10% for the defensive back's ability to run support. So it's a lot going on here. It's a lot of work. It's a lot of content. It's a lot of videos. And if you guys just subscribe, hit the notification bell, you guys won't miss any of the videos. And you're going to hear in the background a lot, the dog. Put him up there, right there. He walks around. He makes lots of noise with those jowls. He'll drink some water in the background. And I apologize if that becomes a little annoying at times. I know it's kind of like, come on, man. It's like he waits until I start recording every single time. He's a peach. He's awesome. You guys are awesome. Let's get into this. And we always start with the coaches. Let's get to this coaching staff here in Tennessee. They had a huge offseason, so let's get to it. So it is head coach Brian Callahan in his second year after coming over from the Cincinnati Bengals as the offensive coordinator there. He was brought in to just, revamp this offense, find something with Will Levis, which never ended up happening, and that's why they ended up getting Cam Ward at the first overall pick. They were the worst team in the league last year. So the talent level's not that high. They didn't really do a whole lot. So Callahan is really kind of banking on his ability to player build here. And his offensive coordinator, Nick Holtz, he's my 31st ranked offensive coordinator. I think other than Brian's dad, Bill Callahan, there's not a whole lot to be super excited about from this offensive staff. The offensive line is going to be coached really well, and we'll get to that. But Nick Holtz is sort of this, the Robin to the Batman that's going to be Brian Callahan, who will probably be calling the plays for most of the season at least. It'll be interesting to see how they actually work that out amongst each other. But this is an offensive staff led by a head coach that's going to be, they're all sort of growing together. So if the long-term plan of the front office is to allow this process to happen, then I'm a little bit more enthusiastic about what this team could be, because now you would assume they have their quarterback in place and Callahan now can build off of that. So it'll be interesting to see how they use the players that they have. There's a lot of balance, not a lot of high-end talent, but there's a lot of balance and depth. So it'll be a competitive locker room, and how Brian Callahan and Nick Holtz, particularly on the offense side, embrace that competition should be something to watch. They got Denard Wilson. He's my 12th ranked defensive coordinator. I really like the defensive staff here. They've been pretty good over the last couple of years, even going back with Vrabel and everything. It's been a well-coached defense, even going back then. Denard Wilson, I think, did a better than expected job last year, despite the team's record. T'Vondre Sweat came in, developed really well. What they do with the secondary is going to be interesting, but from a front four perspective, they have built a really good group, and they're a very well-coached group. So how they build on that and how Denard Wilson takes some of these lower-end guys on the defensive side of the ball in the secondary, and especially in that linebacking group, the challenge will be how they develop those guys moving forward. But it's really going to be a team that is going to have to rely on playing smart defense while the offense sort of gets their sea legs underneath them with a new quarterback, with some new offensive linemen. There's a lot of turnover on the offensive line again. Some new young wide receivers out there to join Calvin Ridley. They drafted Alec Amenior, and they brought in Xavier Restrepo, who's got that built-in chemistry with Cam Ward. So it's going to be a lot of this offensive staff trying to figure out who's the starting 11, who can you game plan around, who are the detriments of the team, shuffling up that offensive line. And that defense is going to have to carry them through a lot of the games early in the season, which is why also they're kind of ranked where they are here, which is dead last. And you'll see as we get into these player evals where the key issues are going to be and why that is putting a lot of pressure on this coaching staff, who I don't know. Again, the front office is going to determine how short this leash is for them. But if it's a short leash, then this coaching staff could be done and there could be a complete reshuffle yet again, which I think would just be bad for all things involved here. I hope that they just allow Callahan to work this out, let his vision come through, and maybe take time to develop these players, because you'll see good players coming up, just not ready yet to be that true juggernaut roster. Now, this would be the time in the video where I jump in and talk about today's sponsor, but there are no sponsors. And that's because I'm still a building channel. So what you guys can do to help me build so that this can become an ad read and I can make some of that money is you hit that subscribe button, and the thumbs up on the video is even bigger than that. You hit the thumbs up, it pushes this algorithm out to other people, even if you think what I'm saying right now is absolutely ridiculous. Hope you guys stick around. Now let's get back to the content. Thumbs up, subscribe, leave a comment. Back to the content. So we're going to start here with the quarterbacks, and it's Cam Ward, the rookie, the number 1 overall pick. He comes in, he's tied for 26th for me out of all the starting quarterbacks in the league. It's very hard to rank a rookie quarterback very high, especially in their rookie year, especially if they're not this true blue chip talent like we saw last year with Caleb Williams, like we see a couple of years ago with Trevor Lawrence, even with Bryce Young. This quarterback class was really, and it proved the way it was drafted, it was Cam Ward is the day one starter out of everybody, and then everyone else is sort of a developmental project, which was, especially with last year's draft with all those quarterbacks that went early. But the one thing that we really liked about Cam Ward, was his graded traits here. And he threw a great deep ball. He was really good with the intermediate passing. He was even good, within that little 10 yards underneath, dumping the ball in front of linebackers. He did pretty well at that as well, working with Xavier Restrepo as a slot receiver. Had a decent play action game, but it was his play under pressure, his ability to escape the pocket. Now, he's a good athlete, but he doesn't run into the same problem that a lot of great athletic quarterbacks run into when they're in college, and we'll see how that translates into early in his NFL career through his rookie season, that it's not just run first. You see him, he'll escape a pocket, he'll keep his eyes downfield, he'll find an open receiver. He's not so quick to just tuck it and go. His escape ability, he trusts his eyes down the field, he has really good processing, getting from one read to another. There's not a lot of boneheaded throws, like you saw from other rookies in the class, like maybe like a Tyler Shook, who would just have moments where you're like, what the hell were you thinking? There's not a lot of that happening. A lot of that has to do with Cam Ward being in college a little bit longer. And, his patience has just been really well coached into him. And for Brian Callahan now to acquire him and be able to work with that again. Another guy that didn't make mistakes like that was Joe Burrow. Now, I'm not saying that Cam Ward is that guy coming into the league, even that he's going to have that initial impact. But there is something to say about a quarterback, a young rookie quarterback coming in who has good eyes, who trusts his arm, who will make the most economic throw as opposed to just trying to zip one into a tight window or rushing things and just tucking it, taking 5 yards. He's going to escape the pocket. He's going to look downfield, and he's going to find the open guy, even if he has to run around. His eyes are, the way he shifts back and forth from side to side, deep, short to intermediate. And, when he's kept clean, he is what you would expect out of any quarterback. When they are kept clean, he's very effective there as well. He doesn't get a bonus for the run game, even though he is a great athlete, and that's because of the things that I just said. He will run, but he's not so quick to just do that. He'd rather run around behind the line of scrimmage waiting for an open receiver to come his way than maybe say what you see from a Lamar Jackson or a Jalen Hurts, where they're just going to go and they're going to use that athleticism. They're going to try and make a big play happen with their legs. He's more like, I hate making this, like how Josh Allen will run around in the back, how Patrick Mahomes, for example, will run around in the back. Those are two very, very unfair comparisons to make for Cam Ward. But it's stylistically like that. Very good athlete, but is a definite throw-first quarterback, and he wants to be in the pocket. He's very comfortable there as well. I think this is going to open up a lot of what this offense could be, because he's going to present at very least as a dual threat, and it's something you can go to with him if the offense demands it. If you don't get great production out of your receivers or tight ends, they can't get open, then you can actually have a package in there where it's a more running quarterback style, and Cam Ward's going to be effective at that while you figure out what is going on around him, maybe the offensive line and receivers room. So these are the weapons that he's getting to start his rookie campaign, and you see there's two big veteran presences there with Calvin Ridley and Tyler Lockett, who just got signed in free agency. Tyler Lockett's going to be, I'd say, a very good number 2 for this offense. I think his role, he's a very safe option out there. He's not going to drop a lot of passes. He's going to get open. He's going to get tough yards. He's not going to take a lot of hits either. Notoriously, the highlight reel of Tyler Lockett is him just sort of falling down. But the feature here is the number 1 receiver, Calvin Ridley, who, after bouncing from Atlanta to Jacksonville, looks like he may settle in here pretty well as the number 1 receiver for this season. You're kind of hoping that maybe you can make him a number 2 at some point. I think his perfect role for him in his career is to be a number 2 receiver. You just look at some of the stats that he had. 64 catches, over 1,000 yards, only 4 touchdowns, 8 drops, 11. That's an 11% drop rate. Quarterback rating was 83.8 when throwing his way. Very, very good deep down the field. A very top level intermediate, 10 to 20 yard route runner, and even in the short, under 10 yards, he can be very effective. His size kind of works against him in those senses. His real bread and butter is as a route runner. All those Alabama guys had it really drilled into their head to be great route runners, and that's where he shines. He gets to run those 12 to 15 yard digs and outs and comebacks and everything. Just work in that corner, especially if you get that guy out man coverage. Calvin Ridley's going to win more times than not, even at this stage in his career, a little bit later down the line. Wasn't all that great in the screen game, those wide receiver screen games. I wouldn't necessarily use him for that all that much. Again, just because you want to use his size and his route running ability. He's not really this run after catch guy. I think you can find somebody else in the offense to do that with. And because he's not going to line up in the slot all that much. He's going to be your out wide alpha one receiver, which him and Cam Ward, it'll be interesting to see how their chemistry sort of works, because I think having a great route runner as your number one guy, I think is almost more important as a rookie, because I think it makes passes easier. It allows you to play a little bit more on a schedule and on a timing, more so than it is to have a guy who's more of a contested catch wide receiver, where it's not necessarily about sort of like a timing, almost like a West Coast style offense and passing game. Now, who would that guy be? You look at, it's not going to be Tyler Lockett. Maybe it's Van Jefferson and Treylon Burks sort of competing for that spot. Bryce Oliver, I think, is a really underrated player on this roster. But then they did get two rookies. Alec Ayamanor. They drafted him. He wasn't, to me, Xavier Restrepo, who they picked up as a UDFA, the teammate of Cam Ward. I actually liked him better as a player anyway. I think his workouts definitely worked against him with how slow he ran and everything. But I wouldn't be overly concerned about having him just playing a slot receiver role, run good routes, stay in that short to intermediate level, and be somebody that Cam Ward can count on throughout a game. You have that built-in chemistry. They sort of know what the other one is thinking. I think that can be used to Tennessee's advantage, even though I don't think Restrepo's, I wouldn't say his ceiling is very high. He gets a 75 grade. He was the third best receiver on the team in the wide receiver room. But I don't know that his ceiling is as good as Amenor's is, or even what Treylon Burks could be in a competent offense, competently run offense. So it'll be interesting to see what kind of opportunities Burks gets in this offense. But with the two veterans sort of locked in, you look at who the slot guy would be in this scenario, and it's not going to be Van Jefferson. It's probably not going to be Treylon Burks either. So it's a huge opportunity for Restrepo to take that leap from being a UDFA. This was the perfect situation for him to end up in, with his college quarterback, who actually made him look like a star in college, which is why I think it helped shock everyone a lot more when he worked out so terribly at his pro day and private workouts or whatever. You move on to Chigakonkwo, the tight end. He's like that, top 12 tight end in the league, sort of like an H-back role. Is a really good receiving threat out there at all levels. He can line up in the slot and inline. That's usually where he lives. He's not going to contribute at all in run blocking, and that's why they go out and they get a guy like Gunnar Helm from Texas. Doesn't drop the ball. He's really sure-handed guy, so he's going to be somebody who Cam Ward, I'm sure, is going to really love in the red zone and in short yardage situations. He's going to be somebody who I would anticipate could potentially be a breakout player of the year, just because a rookie quarterback's best friend is a tight end. And when you have a tight end like him, sure-handed, good catch radius, it's going to help Cam Ward. I think you'll see Cam Ward play with some confidence when throwing the ball Chigakonkwo's way. More than half of his yards were after the catch, so he's a good athlete out there. He lined up out wide almost 19% of the time, almost a fifth of the time that he was out there running routes. So he can be that, look for that maybe in the goal line, because, Calvin Ridley and Tyler Lockett, Xavier Restrepo, they're not necessarily these big body guys. You're going to get some quick shiftiness, those quick passes in the red zone. That's going to be Lockett and Ridley. But what happens if you want to throw a back shoulder fade inside the 10-yard line? that's going to be where Okonkwo sort of lives with this offense. Gunnar Helm, more of a traditional tight end. Josh Wiley, drafted, I believe he was drafted last year, sort of sitting there as a tight end 3. I think there's a world where Okonkwo sort of lines up in the backfield, sort of an H-back role, where you get Gunnar Helm as more of a traditional tight end, or just, creating mismatch opportunities out there. Ridley, Lockett, Okonkwo, Helm could be a set there, like that, a 2 tight end set that you can see quite often, just to create matchup issues. Just make the defense talk, make the defense identify who's where. Split a Okonkwo into the slot and have Helm at tight end. Make the defense do more thinking and allow your offense to sort of dictate the pace of the game and stylistically what the game is going to look like for the opposing team's defense. And maybe that will help create more opportunities, and you'll steal some more points. You'll steal some more first downs that way. You're getting good work from your running backs out of the backfield as well. Pollard and Spears, they're almost redundant. And I wonder how much longer this is even going to be a combination. I feel like Pollard was brought in because Spears, they didn't trust that Spears would perform, and you'll see what Pollard's stats looked like later. But I think as talents, Pollard gets a little bit more, because I think he's just a little bit more of a better true running back, but not by much. So I think being able to have those guys both on the field, or have one or the other on the field, not giving away what you're going to be doing on offense like you would in some other situations if you were another team, I think that's hugely advantageous too. And they're going to be guys who are going to be good run after the catch guys. You can run those play action screens, and having that at your disposal for Cam Ward, help him get some completions, build some confidence, get some positive momentum without having to do a whole lot. You just get the ball in the hands of some of these athletes, Lockett, Pollard, Spears, and get some run after the catch going. I think that could be hugely advantageous, even though the top end talent is still not high whatsoever. Now let's take a look at the offensive line. And there's a couple of new faces here yet again. We know that 2 years in a row, they drafted offensive lineman Peter Skoronski, and then the first pick of the Brian Callahan era was J.C. Latham, who's moving to right tackle. Because they brought in Dan Moore from Pittsburgh to play left tackle, paid him quite a lot of money, and they're hoping that they can get something out of him that maybe Pittsburgh couldn't. Dan Moore played well in his rookie year, considering, I guess, considering where he was drafted. Things looked up, and it never really built from there. Pittsburgh ended up just drafting tackles for the next couple of years, Broderick Jones and Troy Fautanu, to just run Dan Moore out of town, because this is what Dan Moore did last year as a starter in Pittsburgh. He gave up 12 sacks, 41 pressures, 26 hurries. He had 5 penalties. It was not a great season for Dan Moore. Do I think he's starting caliber? I think he's a bottom end starter, and I think the fact that he got paid, I don't know what that is. I think that maybe just Callahan carrying over that senseless way that Cincinnati was signing offensive tackles to just these ridiculous contracts and just banking on these low-end starters, high-end backup types to just save the offense. That's why Joe Burrow got killed every year. So it'll be interesting to see, can they get out of Dan Moore what they need? If not, are they looking offensive tackle in the draft next year? Probably. You got to protect him, man. Callahan, I understand why you go out and get Dan Moore, because you were looking at the draft and you're going, okay, where do we get our next offensive tackle? We're going quarterback 1. What do we do after that? Is there a spot for us to get a starting caliber tackle after getting Cam Ward? If not, we just got to go get the best offensive lineman on the market that suits our scheme. So I understand them going and getting Dan Moore, them overpaying him. They had the money to overpay him anyway. But I don't anticipate, despite them paying him what they did, them being all that too tied down to him and feeling sort of at the mercy of his development. It's sort of, you're going to play well this year or you're gone. Because we will just bump J.C. Latham back to left tackle and maybe play, a rookie that we did pick up in Brandon Crenshaw Dickinson, I think is his name. Dickinson, it's a long name. I couldn't fit it all on the screen, guys. Jesus Christ. Peter Skoronski settling in as a really good pass blocking guard. Lloyd Cushenberry took a step back last year. He played really, really well that last year in Denver. You were sort of hoping that you got that out of him this year. Hopefully another year with Bill Callahan will get him back on track. J.C. Latham playing left tackle last year will now play right tackle, which may be a more comfortable role for him. That's where he was playing his final year of college, sort of played as a fish out of water at left tackle, and it was quite serviceable for a rookie. But as high as they drafted him, you want him in his most comfortable spot to get the most return on that. And then Kevin Zeitler, who serviceable still as a pass blocker here, brings a great veteran presence and raises the floor of the offensive line. I think that's really important too, is them getting veterans in there to raise the floor of what this offensive line can be, because you got some depth pieces in there like John Ojokwu and Logan Bruce and Blake Hance. So you have some depth pieces in there that can fill in at a pinch, but you want that sure-handed veteran who is going to give you starting caliber something, either in the pass game or the run game, the way that Zeitler does, and then give you something elite at the other thing, the way Zeitler does in the run game, which we'll get to shortly after that. Moving on to the running backs here, into the running game. This is what I mean when I said they're sort of the same ilk. There's not a whole lot of difference between Tony Pollard and Tyjae Spears in terms of their talent level. It's just a matter of who's going to get hot, who's going to get featured, who's going to get the ball. Pollard coming over from Dallas, I think that they felt that he was going to be much better, but then he just wasn't, Now, it's not to say that he didn't have a decent statistical output. He had 1,000 yards, 98 zone carries, 151 gap carries, 5 touchdowns. He was notoriously allergic to the end zone. At least he found it 5 times. Yards after contact was pretty huge for him. And he had a balance of outside yards and inside yards. He was very balanced back running the ball. Fumbled it twice, had 13 carries of 15 or more yards. He accounted for 53 first downs for the Titans. But that was in a situation where it was kind of like he was getting, it's tough to rank him that high because he wasn't doing anything particularly spectacular. Like, he wasn't out there changing the game with his carries the way a Derrick Henry or Saquon Barkley did. He just sort of got the ball and produced a little bit and really had no choice but to produce. You get 250 carries, you're kind of hoping that you can eke out the yards that he got. Only getting 5 touchdowns, it is what it is. When it comes to Tony Pollard, Julius Chestnut's another one in there. You look at, I grade him a 72 as a depth piece. You can run running back by committee here, and you're just not getting a whole lot. It's the 30th ranked running back room. Even with Tyjae Spears, who got 312 yards, he had 4 touchdowns on way less carries. So he found the end zone a lot better than Tony Pollard did. Both guys were great after contact. Didn't get a lot of explosive runs, not a lot of explosive plays. And you're hoping that changes with the development of the offensive line and the signings that they made. But this is just not a running back room that you can look to that you go, this is something that I'm giving my rookie quarterback this running attack that's going to give him comfort. No, you've got running backs that you're going to use in the passing game that no team is going to fear on first down or on second and short. Like, they're not going to fear this running attack. They're going to come in very confident against this group. there wasn't anyone for them to bring in and to sign. They weren't going to throw money at a running back. Maybe they could have picked up one in the draft. It was a deep running back class, but on the outset, were you going to get somebody unless you were taking Ashton Genty, who was going to explode this offense? Probably not. So I understand why they're sort of rolling with this this running back room for a second straight season. I don't know how long it'll last. Khalil Mullins is a rookie that came in. I never really got to look at him. Maybe he's going to burst onto the scene here and be that almost unknown running back, that late round running back who just has a breakout season, the way that we see almost every single year there's a running back who does that. So maybe that's the case, and that's going to be what sort of kickstarts the offense to take it to another level. But as of now, this running back room just is not exciting. So you take a look at the offensive line for the running game here. They're 23rd, and it's really carried by Kevin Zeitler, who we are featuring here. In the zone, he's an A- grade as a zone blocker. In gap, he was B+. Ran a lot more zone than gap in Detroit. It'll be interesting to see how that changes here. You saw with the running backs, they had more gap carries than zone carries. We'll see how that plays out here. But this is what I mean by why you bring in a guy like Zeitler, because he does boost this offensive line now to where they're a really good running attack. Or at least they're going to have good run blocking to open up to have a good running attack. Let these guys be shifty and use use their shiftiness and their agility and their quickness to open up opportunities for them to help out Cam Ward again. Everything's about helping out Cam Ward. You look at the rest of this offensive line in terms of run blocking, Latham and Moore, they're fine. Skoronski, the arm length really plays against him here. This was the concern as to why he got drafted as a guard and not a tackle coming out of college, is because of the arm length, and that's where it really affects him here as a run blocker. But when you have Zeitler in there, I anticipate most of the running is going to be done to him and JC Latham. And now Latham playing on the right side of the line, is he going to drastically improve his run blocking back to sort of what they were hoping it would have been last year? I think that that's a real possibility as well. Nicholas Petit-Frere, Brandon Crenshaw, again, I would highlight that rookie because he comes in grading very similarly to what they have in Dan Moore there at left tackle. So if Dan Moore sort of flops and fails, which is likely, it's not unlikely, you have some sort of guy to bring in there that maybe, again, bursts onto the scene. Those late round players, they find the perfect scheme that fits, get the perfect opportunity, and then boom, they're a star. But overall, we're looking at the 31st ranked offense. The offensive coordinator, 31st. Passing offense, the 28th pass offense. And the 31st rush offense, really because you don't know what you're getting out of that running back room in terms of turn around, hand the ball off running backs. Not a lot of power back there for short yardage situations. It's a lot of just speed and hoping that the shiftiness in the offensive line can do their job to open up opportunities for them to produce. Now let's move on to the defensive side of the ball, and we'll start with the pass rush here. And it's a group of a lot of number 2 guys who are maybe going to get more playing time than they should in these situations, which, I mean, it is what it is. But we have Arden Key, who is the featured edge here, the number 1 edge on the roster. I wonder, maybe do they add a Jadeveon Clowney in free agency? Do they add another edge guy here? Because Arden Key as a pass rusher, as a starting edge guy, I don't hate it. I actually kind of like it. I just don't like that he's your best guy coming into a season. And not only your best guy, but your best guy by a pretty significant margin. He hits 7 sacks, 39 pressures, 8 quarterback hits, 24 hurries, on 731 snaps, played almost all the snaps on the outside. I don't hate it. I don't. But when you go back and you look at the rest of what this edge room is, Jalen Harrell is your next best guy. It's going to be Harrell, Duke, and Carter, your next best pass rushers off the edge coming in here. It's so shambly almost that Draymond Jones right now, when you go and look at the depth chart, is projected to be the starting outside linebacker. And Draymond Jones is not a small man to be playing a 3-4 outside linebacker role. He's definitely better served playing on a true defensive line set here. But he will definitely be somebody out there getting a lot of snaps just because who else is going to do it? You know, Olufemi Oladejo was drafted. He's more of an early down run stuffing edge, like a really good edge setter. You know, so this isn't really going to be where he comes in and contributes. T'Vondre Sweat is going to play. He's going to get all of his, A-gap, one technique snaps in these situations. I'm sure he'll rotate with Draymond Jones because Jeffrey Simmons is going to be your all-purpose defensive lineman. You look at, the way his snaps have sort of spread out, 421 as a B-gap, 316 over the tackle. So that's like 3 and a 4-eye technique where he lives almost exclusively. 45 pressures, 6 quarterback hits, 34 hurries. Good for an interior defensive lineman who plays in those certain techniques across the defensive line. But again, other than him, who's your top alpha guy? You need that top alpha guy off the edge, and Arden Key's going to have to maybe play outside of his ability a little bit here. And then Jalen Harrell, Khalid Duke, Lorenzo Carter, who's stepping up? Who's your number 2 edge rusher here? It can't be Draymond Jones. If it ends up being Draymond Jones, then they're in trouble. They are in trouble if that's the case. So now we look at the defensive line in terms of their run ability. They're against the run. They're one of the best in the whole league. They're tied for 3rd, and it really, really starts with what they have going up the middle. We'll look at here T'Vondre Sweat, who's one of the very best run stuffers in the league already in his career, just coming off that amazing rookie year against the run. Had 31 tackles, only 2 missed tackles, a missed tackle percentage of 3.7%. He got his hands on you, and it was over. Played the B-gap, 590 snaps last year. That's where most of his run snaps occurred. Most of his A-gap snaps that you see there of the 83 A-gap snaps, those were on passing situations. But most of the time you're going to see him line up in that B-gap along with Jeffrey Simmons opposite him. Just a fantastic player, coming in, super athlete. The character concerns are what dropped him in the draft. But what a star he turned out to be. And if he continues to develop that pass rush, those pass rush moves, then you could be looking at another Dexter Lawrence type player here with a guy who can play the nose tackle but be super effective as a 3-down defensive lineman, which is super rare to find in nose tackles in these in modern day. Jeffrey Simmons, it sort of all speaks for itself. One of the best in the entire league, that hybrid player. Sebastian Joseph Day is one that needs to be talked about as well. He really spread out a lot across the defensive line in multiple different situations. Again, really shine in the run game. That's his forte here. Bouncing back after sort of falling off after leaving the Los Angeles Rams, and he got back to that form last year that he left the Rams, I think, to go play with the Chargers the next season. Got back to that form, at least on those early rundown. Outside snaps, surprisingly, he played that outside defensive end role 206 times. So maybe on these early down situations, he ends up playing that role with Arden Key on the other side, because Arden Key, again, you saw the grade there. He's nothing to be, sneezed at either. The missed tackle rate is a little bit higher than you'd want it to be for Joseph Day, so he's got to clean that up a little bit. I'd love to see that get under 10%. And force some fumbles, man. Force some fumbles too. Get after that ball. But he's sort of like your Swiss Army knife. Him and Jeffrey Simmons get to sort of be the Swiss Army knife players on the interior defensive line on these early downs, where you can move them around. And now you forced the offensive line of the opposing team to identify where they are, where they're lined up, and then your quarterback has to identify. Maybe you're changing it up a bit because it's gonna be tough to figure out if Joseph Day is on the outside. Then where do you go? You have to figure out Joseph Day's lining up as a 4-3 defensive end. You might change to go the other way, but you're running right into Arden Key, who is a really, really good starting caliber, number one, middle of the pack, maybe top 25 of all the starters. Of all the stars in the league, he's probably in the top 25 against the run. And then the rookie Oladejo, this is where you're going to see him get his opportunity to shine. I think is going to be on early downs. And I think that's going to open him up to maybe be the number 2 edge guy on the team by the end of the season. Draymond Jones not giving you anything in run defense. Neither is Jalen Harrell, who we saw featured in the pass rush segment of this. So how they fit in all this in this chaos is going to be quite interesting, especially Draymond Jones. I mean, is he going to play more of an outside linebacker role because of what you have here with these 3 interior defensive linemen? Is this going to just be the 3-man rotation for a majority of the season? Then Draymond Jones sort of has to find his role in there, and he'll be competing with an Oladejo rather than these interior defensive linemen. Now here is the true weakness of this team, and it's been a weakness for a while, and they didn't fix it in the offseason at all. It's the linebacker room, and you see it in coverage against the pass, dead last in the NFL. Run defense, 30th. Outside of Cody Barton, they got nobody. They need somebody to step up so drastically here in this linebacker group. I feature Otis Reese because I feel like, to me, he's the most likely one for me. James Williams, converted safety from Miami. That's tough. That's tough to see. He's got style. Jeremiah Owusu-Koramoah sort of throws the mold out the window when it comes to guys that size playing linebacker. James Williams, second year, what's that look like? Coming in, I thought it was going to look a lot better than what it did, and it didn't look good at all. Now you got Cedric Gray, who I believe also was drafted last year out of North Carolina or Kentucky. I feel like he was one of those guys, North Carolina or Kentucky. And he's another guy. Is he going to be the one to step up? Like, you got these 4 guys here who personally I think would be lucky to make the roster on any other team, and all 5 of them might be on the roster. Hopefully they add a veteran at some point and increase this ranking for themselves. Because if Cody Barton, who's to me is a serviceable number, a rotational linebacker, low end starter overall. He comes in, against the pass, he's decent for a linebacker. It's hard to hate on linebackers' ability in the pass game. It is tough. Had 2 interceptions and 2 pass breakups, only allowed 2 touchdowns. So they were attacking him with tight ends and running backs. You take a look at his ability against the run. Dog is over here dying a slow death, choking himself to death. Choking harder than this linebacker group, I will say that, if you guys were able to even hear that. His missed tackle rate is actually pretty good, under 5%. 34 stops, a forced fumble. Doesn't play a whole lot of anything other than inside linebacker. 74 tackles last year. He's fine as an early down linebacker. As your best linebacker, the one that's going to be on the field 95% of the game, this is a lot of pressure to put on a guy who has never had to be that guy. Cody Barton has never had to be that guy. He got a lot of play in the last couple years, but when he was in Seattle, he was sort of like the third guy, and that's a really good place for him to be. Is like that third guy, maybe your number 2 guy, and he's got the pressure of the entire defense, basically the green dot on his helmet. This is going to be the inevitable downfall. Their inability to play at the second level is going to be the downfall of this team altogether, because once you get past that, that elite, front four, they are elite. They're going to make a lot of plays. They're going to save this defense a lot. But when they don't come through for you, this second level is going to just get picked apart by some of these quarterbacks, man. And some of these offensive coordinators, they're going to isolate these linebackers. They're going to figure out where Otis Reese is. They're going to figure out where Cedric Gray is. And they're going to kill this defense. I'm begging somebody to step up. And this is where Denard Wilson's coaching ability, he's a really good defensive coordinator. As you saw where I ranked him, top half of the league, just outside the top 10. This needs to be their focus. You need to find a complement for Cody Barton that's starting caliber. You can't roll out another guy who's this, like, if it was any other team, he's on the bench or he's on the practice squad. You find a veteran. I don't have the veteran linebackers here in front of me. Go get one of them instead, and just raise the floor of this group, of this defense, because this is going to be a tremendous detriment to this team, and it's going to be why they're going to lose games. Their inability to come up with big plays on third and medium after that defensive line puts in all that work on first and second down, and then a tight end just sneaks behind them. Brenton Strange or Dalton Schultz, or who else in their division? Oh, Tyler Warren, who just entered their division, just going to sneak into that seam in the intermediate, and these linebackers are just going to be lost out there, unable to cover them. And you don't even have like a great secondary to pick up the slack for that. So I can't be more negative on this than I have. It's probably, when you combine the coverage and the run defense into one solid grade, this is the worst linebacking group in the entire league. And here we are with the defensive backs, and they are tied for 27th in pass coverage. They are 24th against the run. Again, L'Jarius Sneed was the big free agency pickup, or they traded for him from Kansas City, one of the two, something like that. I think they traded for him, actually. Traded like a third-round pick for him. And boy, oh boy, did he not play nearly as well as they were hoping. You see 9 catches on 21 targets for 107 yards and a touchdown. You go, oh, that's not so bad. But then you realize, yikes. The passer rating was fine. He terrible in the run support. He's sort of relying a lot on help over the top, a C grade for man coverage, C grade for zone coverage. The quarterbacks weren't particularly accurate in a lot of those targets either. And, only getting, less 280 snaps last year as well didn't really allow him to show his full plethora of ability. And the injury, an injury-rated season is a concern, obviously. You want him to bounce back. If he can bounce back to that form he had in Kansas City, then yeah, you got a star. He was so great there, but this sort of, you wonder, was it more Spagnuolo than it was L'Jarius Sneed's ability during that time when he built up such strong equity in Kansas City. And there's not a whole lot around him either, with Jarvis Brownlee and Darrell Baker as your other outside guys, maybe. Justin Hardy. Roger McCreary is going to be your nickel, and he's not a whole lot better than, he's not exactly like top of the top flight. His passer rating gave up was 101, gave up 2 touchdowns, didn't have an interception or a pass breakup at all, gave up 51 of the 64 targets for 367 out of the slot. An average run supporter. It's just not, it's not great at all. He's lucky to be a starter. And again, Denard Wilson's going to need to get this team to step up. C-grade coverage ability is not what you need to be a successful team in this league, especially when you got CJ Stroud in your division, you got Trevor Lawrence in your division, even Anthony Richardson in your division. You're playing Joe Burrow and Lamar Jackson and all those guys. You need better performances out of your guys that are out there covering the receivers, because your safeties are actually pretty good. We'll start with look at the depth first. Xavier Woods sort of just finds his way into the league. He's a really good safety 3 in this group. You want to roll out the 3 safety set. He's a great guy to have in there. Kevin Winston is going to be your breakout opportunity guy. He'll come in, play some box safety for you. Really good run support coming in his rookie year. Detriment on the back end against the pass. But Amani Hooker, really good in zone. When he's able to be instinctual, when he's able to just sort of track down, stare at the quarterback, figure out where he's going with the ball, trust your eyes, and attack. That's Amani Hooker's game. He only gave up a passer rating of 68.4. Had 5 interceptions to 3 touchdowns allowed. Giving up 3 touchdowns and only 37 targets. That's high. That's not great, but to back it up then with 5 interceptions and 2 pass breakups, your interception PBU to touchdown allowed ratio is really good. You've pretty much doubled that up compared to what you've given up for touchdowns. So you can continue to improve that. You just don't want to put them in man coverage situations, which is not necessarily something you want to put any safety in. Zone coverage safeties, that's where you want them to live, and he can sort of play everywhere. 99 snaps in the slot as well, playing that dime defense, where that's where he played a lot of his man coverage also. So, maybe that's where he had some really good run support moments, but not great in the pass. Mike Brown and him are sort of carbon copies in terms of their abilities. It's almost like having Pollard and Tajay Spears over there on the at the running back room. So very similar in that sense. I would like that they can give you equal levels of production. You can sort of put them anywhere and they'll produce for you. But overall, this is the 29th ranked defense in the league. You have the 12th best defensive coordinator, but you have the worst pass defense in the entire NFL. You don't have a particularly great pass rush outside of Jeffrey Simmons. You don't have great linebacker supporting coverage either, the worst group. You don't have, you have bottom 5 level secondary right now. So you're hoping that they can continue, that Snead can step up, Roger McCreary can step up. You can find a number 2 guy in Brownlee or Baker. The run defense, if you get into like the top half of the league in pass defense, having like a borderline top 20 run defense the way they have, it's less detrimental than what it is. But when your rush defense is not in the top 20 and it's the best feature that you got, it's just not a good look. Now take a look at their schedule here. The strength of schedule, they're 29th. It's not a difficult schedule at all. But the Vegas over-under is 5.5 wins, and I have them under. Because, I think they can beat the Colts, Jacksonville, and New Orleans all at home. I think those are winnable games for them. Then you get Cleveland, Jacksonville, and Indy on the road. I think that those are the push games. But then you got Kansas City, San Francisco, Houston, the Chargers, Denver, the Rams, Arizona even. Those are tough games, man. So, and you got teams like New England and Vegas who both got better. Denver got better. So you anticipate San Francisco's to be better than what their record was last year as well. So it's a tough road. They don't really have the bodies to pull it off. I don't think that they'll finish with the worst record in the league. I think when you have the 29th strength of schedule, if you're going to get maybe 4 or 5 wins, that won't be the worst record in the league. But I think, again, from a pure talent level, it's just not there. And they are the last ranked team in the league for me, number 32, 30th ranked head coach, 31st offense, 29th defense. It's going to be a long season, I think, especially early on. I think as the season goes on, you're going to see them play better and better. I think that'll be the goal more than anything else, to see them play better and better as the season goes on. Don't have high expectations. Just focus on developing your quarterback, developing your offensive line, developing some targets in your wide receiver room, develop some guys on the defense, continue to improve guys like T'Vondre Sweat. I think that's got to be what the goals are. You're not looking at this, we're going to win now in Tennessee. It's just not going to happen. And there it is, the number 32 team in my 2025 NFL Deep Dive series, going on all summer leading up to the start of the regular season. Don't miss number 31 coming up next. Might already be posted by the time you guys watch this. And if you are new here, please subscribe, hit the thumbs up. That would be huge for me. I really appreciate that. And, please come back, leave your comments in the comment section below. Appreciate you guys. It's a lot of hard work. I know there's other deep dive series out there. Doing my best out here to give you guys a little bit of a different flavor, a little bit of a different point of view, a little bit of a different perspective. And I hope you guys enjoyed it. And I hope you guys enjoy it in the future. And I will see you guys with the next video next time.